During his long military career, retired four-star Army General Stanley McChrystal led U.S. and international forces in Afghanistan. He was also in charge of Joint Special Operations Command, the nation's premier military counter-terrorism force. Now he's on a new mission called Serve America Together. It's 1 year of paid national service for young Americans 18 and older. They would help communities in critical areas like education, the environment, and disaster relief. General McChrystal joins us from Washington. General, good morning. I want to get to America Serves. I think it's a wonderful idea. But I want to begin with some news of day, actually news of the weekend. President Trump becoming the first president to step foot in North Korea. Your reaction?
Well, it was a little nostalgic from one standpoint. I spent a year assigned to Panmunjom when I was a young captain, so the exact spot where he and Kim Jong-un stood were places that I served. And then my father-in-law landed at the Pusan perimeter in the summer of 1950, fought all the way to the Yalu River and survived as a young tanker. And then my father served a year in combat in the Bitter Hill fights in 1952 and 53. So kind of wrapped up into the idea of Korea. When I see the potential for progress like every American, I am hopeful, cautiously optimistic. When I see Kim Jong-un, I see the grandson of Kim Il-sung, the dictator who in 1948 began the brutal regime. And so I'm really cautious about it.
Does it come at a high cost, do you think, General, for the United States? You know, some say this certainly legitimizes Kim Jong-un, but is a high cost for the United States. Do you agree?
Well, Gayle, in one way I do, but in another way, I'd almost argue that we make more of North Korea than North Korea deserves. It's a small country. Sure, it's developing nuclear weapons, and it's kind of a pain around the world. But I don't think we should legitimize their ability to threaten us or their ability to threaten the world more than it deserves, because I actually think it encourages that behavior.
So what would you consider success in this next round of negotiations? Because everyone's saying, look, we got this great photo op, but what else have we really gotten here? Not much.
Yeah. I think success, obviously, is trying to denuclearize North Korea. But if you look at Kim Jong-un, that is a long stretch for him. It's unlikely he could retain power internally if he gave up nuclear weapons with his own entourage. And so I think that's a real question mark. I think if we can maintain stability, I think that's about as good as we get.
General, I wanted to ask you quickly about Iran, because you led forces both in Iraq and Afghanistan. With the rising tension in Iran, are you worried about the risk of war there?
I am. There is the reality that we've got to see some things through Iranian eyes. And if you go back to 1953 and the overthrow of Prime Minister Mossadegh, the Iranians feel as though they have been contained, they have been battered, they have been invaded. And so whether we agree with their perspective or not, there is a legitimate viewpoint from them. And so the reality is, I think what we've got to do is avoid this idea that we both think we've got the version of history exactly right, and therefore we bump against each other thinking that the others just won't listen. In reality, I think everybody needs to calm down a little bit. There's behavior the Iranians do that's unacceptable. But the reality is, I think they are a fragmented society, not very supportive of the regime. And our best play is not to unify them, but to work the other forces.
All right, General, from one fragmented society to another society, our own, that is sometimes described as fragmented these days. You are part of an organization with an idea to help heal some of those wounds through national service. Why do you think it's a good idea for every young American to spend a year in national service?
Well, I'd go back to something that was said in 1838 by young, rising Abraham Lincoln, and describing what would destroy the United States, the greatest threat. He said there'd never be a foreign power who could do that. If we would die, it would be by national suicide. I think that's true. We're about to celebrate the 4th of July, and we're all going to feel very good about the formation of our nation and an exceptional nation. But most of us are citizens by accident of birth. We haven't done much for it. We hold on to our rights, but sometimes we forget our responsibilities. I think most of us learn responsibility to our nation, to ourselves, and most importantly to our fellow Americans through experience, the ability to serve. So what I think we need is the opportunity to bring young Americans together for a year of paid full-time service. And what it would produce is alumni of an experience that would change them for the rest of their lives.
General, how do you make this happen?
Well, first, it's a bipartisan idea, so it doesn't have to be Republican or Democratic. It can be from all of us. I think it's a public-private partnership. It's not a great big secretary of service and brings everybody together. Instead, it's a constellation of existing, the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, City Year, Teach for America, all of these added with many other movements brought together to create opportunities. There would have to be some funding from the federal government, some from private philanthropy and other sources. But also we have to create an environment where, because it's not mandatory, it is socially accepted, culturally accepted, but also a young person who does it comes out of it better. Maybe we give them education credits. Maybe we have a GI Bill equivalent. You know, the idea of free college is great, but the reality is we value what we work or pay for.
And you're saying paid service instead of volunteer. To your last point, we value what we pay for.
Well, it has to be paid too, Gayle, because you don't want it to be only people whose parents can afford to support them for a year.
Very good point. General McChrystal, very glad to see you. I was disappointed to see you were going to be in D.C. and not at our table, but we'll take you however we can see you. I was waiting for you this morning.
Well, it's my pleasure, Gayle. Thank you.
Good to see you, sir, on TV.